First of all, listen to this audio which led to lawyer Makebi Zulu going to jail.
Fellow countrymen and women, this is an address on behalf of the family of President Hakainde Hichilema, sixth Republican President of the Republic of Zambia. Between yesterday and today, we have had occasion to meet the government of the Republic of Zambia, represented by Honorable Zambian. In our meetings, they requested to hear what the position was as regards how the matter remains of our former president of Zambia. In dealing with this subject matter, the position was presented to the government of the Republic of Zambia. The position being that the family wished to respect the wishes of the former president of the Republic. And the respect that has been accorded to him, as he wished could be accorded to him, was that he be buried in Zambia. And in being buried in Zambia,
Lawyer Makebi Zulu just crossed a line with President HH, and the consequences could land him in jail. What did he say that has the entire nation watching? You won't believe this. Breaking developments in Zambia. Top legal mind Makebi Zulu may be heading for jail after provoking President Hakainde Hichilema, HH, in a fiery public statement. Zambians are shocked, the legal world is buzzing, and the political landscape may be forever changed. What did Makebi Zulu say? Is this a threat to democracy or a fight for justice? Will President HH respond or retaliate? Watch the full video as we dive deep into this intensifying showdown between a prominent Zambian lawyer and the head of state. You don't want to miss this. Like, comment, and subscribe for urgent updates on Zambia's legal and political battles. Call for resignation of the Chief Justice and criticism of judicial institutions. Makebi Zulu has publicly called for the resignation of Zambia's Chief Justice, accusing them of being in collusion with the president. This statement reflects his concerns about the impartiality and integrity of the judiciary in Zambia. He further criticized the Judicial Complaints Commission, JCC, as incompetent and labeled the Attorney General as reckless. These remarks suggest a deep distrust in the judicial system's ability to operate independently and fairly, pointing to perceived political interference or mismanagement. Context: these accusations are significant in Zambia's political landscape, where tensions between the judiciary and political actors have often been a point of contention. Such statements could be part of a broader critique of governance, rule of law, or specific legal proceedings involving high-profile figures, potentially including members of the Lungu family. Implications: by calling for the Chief Justice's resignation, Zulu is likely aiming to draw public and institutional attention to what he perceives as systemic issues in Zambia's judiciary. This could resonate with citizens or groups who share concerns about judicial independence but may also escalate political tensions, especially if the accusations are seen as targeting the current administration. Elaboration: the claim of the Chief Justice being in cahoots with the president implies a lack of separation between the executive and judicial branches, a serious allegation in any democratic system. The criticism of the JCC as incompetent and the Attorney General as reckless further suggests that Zulu believes the mechanisms for addressing judicial misconduct or legal oversight are failing. Without specific evidence provided in the available information, these statements remain allegations, but they reflect a broader narrative of distrust in Zambia's legal and political institutions. 2. Statement on financial struggles of the Lungu family. As the family spokesperson for the Lungu family, Makebi Zulu shared insights into the financial difficulties faced by former President Edgar Lungu and his wife, Mrs. Lungu. He recounted a conversation where Mrs. Lungu expressed concerns about funding medical procedures due to a lack of money. In response, President Lungu reportedly encouraged her not to lose hope, indicating resilience despite their financial challenges. Context: this statement was made in the context of addressing the media, possibly in South Africa, as part of a broader discussion about the Lungu family situation. The mention of medical procedures suggests personal or health-related challenges faced by the family, which could be tied to their financial constraints. The timing and location, South Africa, may indicate that the family was seeking medical treatment abroad, a common practice for high-profile figures in Zambia when local facilities are deemed insufficient. Implications. By publicly discussing the Lungu family's financial struggles, Zulu may be aiming to humanize the former president and his family, portraying them as facing hardships similar to ordinary citizens. This could be a strategic move to garner public sympathy, especially if the family's financial situation is perceived to be a result of political or legal pressures following Edgar Lungu's presidency. It also highlights the personal toll of political life after leaving office. Elaboration. The statement reflects a narrative of perseverance, with Edgar Lungu's encouragement to not lose hope suggesting a stoic response to adversity. However, it also raises questions about the financial status of former presidents in Zambia, including whether they receive adequate state support or pensions. The fact that Zulu, as a family spokesperson, shared this publicly indicates an intent to shape public perception, possibly to counter narratives that portray the Lungu family as wealthy or privileged post-presidency. 3. Media engagement in South Africa. Makebi Zulu addressed the media in South Africa in his capacity as the Lungu family spokesperson. While the specific content of this media address is not fully detailed in the available information, it is clear that he was speaking on behalf of the family, likely discussing issues related to their personal or legal circumstances. Context. The media address in South Africa suggests that the Lungu family was dealing with matters of significance outside Zambia, possibly related to legal, medical, or political issues. South Africa is often a destination for Zambian political figures for medical treatment, legal consultations, or exile-related activities, given its proximity and advanced infrastructure. Implications. Zulu's decision to speak to the media in South Africa indicates an effort to reach an international audience or to address issues that may have cross-border implications. This could be related to legal battles, political persecution claims, or efforts to secure support for the Lungu family's situation. It also underscores Zulu's role as a vocal advocate for the family, leveraging his legal expertise and public profile. Elaboration. Speaking in South Africa, rather than Zambia, may suggest that the Lungu family is navigating sensitive issues that require an international platform or protection from Zambian authorities. The lack of specific details about the content of the address limits a full analysis, but it could involve clarifications about the family's status, responses to legal proceedings, or appeals for support. Zulu's prominence as a lawyer makes him a credible spokesperson, but his statements may also attract scrutiny from Zambian authorities or political opponents. Broader context and analysis. Makebi Zulu's statements, as reflected in the available information, paint a picture of a vocal critic of Zambia's current judicial and political systems, as well as a dedicated spokesperson for the Lungu family. His accusations against the Chief Justice, JCC, and Attorney General suggest a belief that the rule of law is being undermined by political influences, a common theme in Zambian politics where former leaders and their associates often face legal or political challenges after leaving office. His comments about the Lungu family's financial struggles add a personal dimension, potentially aiming to shift public perception in favor of the former president. Political climate in Zambia. Since Edgar Lungu lost the presidency in 2021 to Hakainde Hichilema, there have been reports of political tensions, including legal actions against members of the former administration. Zulu's statements align with a narrative of political victimization, a tactic often used by opposition figures or their supporters to rally public support. Role as a lawyer and spokesperson. As a lawyer, Zulu's public statements carry weight, but they also risk escalating conflicts with the current government. His role as the Lungu family spokesperson positions him as a key figure in defending their interests, whether in legal battles or public relations. Limitations of information. The information from X posts is inconclusive and lacks specific details about the timing, evidence, or outcomes of Zulu's statements. For instance, there is no mention of whether the Chief Justice or other officials responded to his accusations, nor is there clarity on the specific medical or financial issues faced by the Lungu family. This highlights the need for caution in interpreting these statements without corroborating evidence. Is this a threat to democracy? Potential threat. Engaging the media in South Africa, rather than Zambia, could be seen as an attempt to internationalize the Lungu family's issues, potentially portraying Zambia's government as oppressive or undemocratic to a global audience. If this is done to pressure the government or incite external intervention without exhausting domestic legal channels, it could undermine Zambia's sovereignty and democratic processes. Risk of escalation. By taking the narrative abroad, Zulu risks escalating domestic political tensions, as the Hichilema administration may perceive this as an attempt to damage Zambia's international reputation. This could strain diplomatic relations or fuel domestic unrest, posing an indirect threat to democratic stability. Context of international advocacy. Opposition figures in Africa often use international platforms to highlight domestic issues, especially when they feel domestic institutions are compromised. While this is a legitimate tactic, it can backfire by alienating domestic audiences or prompting government crackdowns, both of which could weaken democratic norms. Is this a fight for justice? Justice perspective. If the Lungu family is facing genuine persecution, e.g., unfair legal actions or denial of rights, addressing the media in South Africa could be a strategic move to seek international support or protection. This aligns with a fight for justice if domestic avenues for redress, e.g., courts or the JCC, are perceived as inaccessible or biased. Global awareness. Raising awareness abroad can pressure the Zambian government to act justly, especially if international organizations or governments take interest. This could be seen as a fight for justice if Zulu's goal is to ensure accountability for the Lungu family's treatment. Limitations. The lack of specific details about the media address makes it hard to assess whether it was a constructive call for justice or a provocative move to embarrass the government. The choice of South Africa as a platform suggests a strategic intent, but its impact depends on the content and audience response. Elaboration. Zulu's media engagement in South Africa reflects a calculated move to amplify the Lungu family's narrative beyond Zambia's borders. If the goal is to expose genuine injustices, such as political persecution or unfair treatment, this could be a legitimate fight for justice, leveraging international pressure to uphold democratic principles. However, if the intent is to undermine the Zambian government without pursuing domestic remedies, it risks being seen as a threat to democracy by bypassing institutional processes and escalating tensions. The lack of clarity about the address's content limits a definitive judgment, but it underscores the delicate balance between advocacy and destabilization. Broader analysis. Threat to democracy or fight for justice. To determine whether Makebi Zulu's statements constitute a threat to democracy or a fight for justice, we must consider their cumulative impact, intent, and context within Zambia's political landscape. Threat to democracy. Erosion of institutional trust. Zulu's accusations against the Chief Justice, JCC, and Attorney General, if unsubstantiated, risk eroding public confidence in key democratic institutions. This could weaken the rule of law and encourage extra-institutional actions, such as protests or defiance of legal processes, which threaten democratic stability. Political polarization. By framing the Lungu family's struggles as a result of government actions, implied, though not explicitly stated, Zulu's statements could deepen Zambia's political divide, particularly between supporters of the ruling United Party for National Development, UPND, and the opposition PF. Polarization can undermine democratic discourse and lead to unrest, as seen in Zambia's history of election-related tensions. Internationalization of domestic issues. Addressing the media in South Africa could be perceived as an attempt to internationalize Zambia's political disputes, potentially inviting external scrutiny or intervention. This risks undermining national sovereignty and democratic self-governance, especially if domestic remedies are not exhausted. Lack of due process. Publicly demanding resignations and criticizing institutions without formal complaints or evidence bypasses democratic mechanisms for accountability, such as the JCC or courts. This could set a precedent for resolving disputes through public pressure rather than institutional processes, weakening democratic norms. Fight for justice. Highlighting judicial independence. If Zulu's accusations are based on evidence of executive interference in the judiciary, his call for accountability aligns with a fight for justice. Ensuring an independent judiciary is essential to democracy, and exposing collusion or incompetence could strengthen the rule of law. Advocating for fair treatment. The Lungu family's financial struggles, if caused by unfair state actions, e.g., asset freezes or denial of pensions, raise legitimate justice concerns. Zulu's role as a spokesperson may involve advocating for their rights, particularly if they are being targeted for political reasons. Raising awareness. By speaking out, Zulu may be seeking to hold the government accountable and protect democratic principles, such as fairness and equality before the law. This is particularly relevant in Zambia, where post-presidency legal battles are often seen as politically motivated. Legal expertise. As a lawyer, Zulu's criticisms carry weight, and his actions could be part of a broader legal strategy to challenge perceived injustices through advocacy, media engagement, or future litigation. Zambia's political context. Zambia's democracy is relatively young, with a history of peaceful transitions but ongoing challenges, including accusations of political persecution, judicial interference, and institutional weaknesses. Since the 2021 election, tensions between the UPND government and PF opposition have been high, with legal actions against former officials often framed as either anti-corruption efforts or political vendettas. Zulu statements must be viewed in this context, where accusations of institutional bias are common but require evidence to avoid being dismissed as partisan rhetoric. Balancing the distinction between a threat to democracy and a fight for justice hinges on intent, evidence, and approach. Intent. If Zulu's goal is to expose genuine injustices and pursue accountability through legal or institutional channels, his actions lean toward a fight for justice. If the intent is to undermine the government or incite unrest for political gain, they pose a threat to democracy. Evidence. Without concrete evidence to support claims of judicial collusion, JCC incompetence, or government persecution, Zulu's statements risk being seen as inflammatory rather than reformative. A true fight for justice requires substantiation to avoid undermining democratic institutions. Approach. Public rhetoric, especially abroad, can amplify legitimate concerns but also risks bypassing democratic processes like formal complaints or litigation. A balanced approach would combine public advocacy with institutional engagement to strengthen, rather than weaken, democracy. Understanding Hichilema's political style and approach to criticism. Context. Hakainde Hichilema, Zambia's president since August 2021, has cultivated an image as a reformist leader focused on economic revitalization, anti-corruption, and democratic governance. His presidency followed a landslide victory over Edgar Lungu, whose administration faced accusations of authoritarianism and human rights abuses. Hichilema's approach to political opposition and criticism, as evidenced by his actions and public statements, provides insight into how he might respond to Zulu's provocative remarks. Likelihood of response. Historical behavior. Hichilema has generally avoided direct public confrontations with critics, preferring to address issues through institutional channels or public speeches that emphasize unity and progress. For example, at the 2023 Summit for Democracy, he highlighted his administration's commitment to free media, freedom of assembly, and an independent electoral commission, suggesting a focus on demonstrating democratic credentials rather than engaging in personal disputes. His response to criticism has often been to underscore policy achievements, such as debt restructuring or climate change mitigation, rather than directly addressing opponents. Strategic restraint. As a leader facing re-election in 2026, Hichilema is likely aware that retaliating against critics like Zulu could reinforce opposition narratives of political persecution, especially given Edgar Lungu's prominence as a potential rival. His past experience as an opposition leader, including his 2017 arrest for treason under Lungu's government, may make him cautious about appearing to suppress dissent. Instead, he may opt for a measured response, such as a public statement reaffirming his commitment to judicial independence or addressing the Lungu family situation indirectly. Public image. Hichilema has been praised internationally for his economic diplomacy and democratic reforms, as noted in meetings with U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden. Engaging in a public spat with Zulu could undermine this image, particularly if it is perceived as retaliatory rather than constructive. Likelihood of retaliation. Low probability of direct retaliation. Hichilema's administration has faced accusations of targeting Lungu-era officials through anti-corruption probes, which some critics view as politically motivated. However, there is no direct evidence in the provided results of Hichilema retaliating against critics through legal or extra-legal means in response to public statements. His firing of the Anti-Corruption Commission (ACC) board in 2024 was in response to specific corruption allegations against the board, not public criticism, suggesting he prefers institutional actions over personal vendettas. Political risks. Retaliating against Zulu, a prominent lawyer with ties to the Lungu family, could escalate tensions with the Patriotic Front (PF) and fuel accusations of authoritarianism, as seen in criticisms from the New Era Democratic Party (NED) regarding freedom of speech. Given Zambia's history of political violence and Hichilema's own experience as a victim of repression, he is likely to avoid actions that could be seen as heavy-handed, such as arrests or legal harassment, unless clear legal grounds exist. Elaboration. Hichilema's political style suggests he is more likely to respond to Zulu's statements indirectly, perhaps through a speech or press release defending the judiciary's independence or clarifying the government's stance on the Lungu family's situation. His focus on international diplomacy and economic reforms indicates a preference for maintaining a positive global image over engaging in domestic political battles. Retaliation, such as targeting Zulu or the Lungu family with legal actions, is less likely unless evidence of wrongdoing emerges, as it could undermine his democratic credentials and alienate voters ahead of the 2026 election. The lack of direct references to Zulu's statements in the provided results suggests Hichilema has not yet publicly addressed them, reinforcing the likelihood of restraint. Conclusion. Based on Hichilema's political style and the provided context, he is more likely to respond to Makebi Zulu's statements than to retaliate. A response would likely be measured, focusing on defending the judiciary's independence, clarifying the government's stance on the Lungu family, or reinforcing democratic reforms through public or institutional channels. Retaliation, such as legal action against Zulu or the Lungu family, is less likely unless clear evidence of wrongdoing emerges, as it could damage Hichilema's international reputation and fuel opposition narratives of repression. Silence remains a possibility, particularly if Hichilema believes the statements will lose traction without his engagement. Most likely scenario, Hichilema may issue a public statement or delegate a response to relevant institutions, e.g., the JCC or Attorney General, to address Zulu's judicial accusations, while indirectly addressing the Lungu family situation through policy clarifications. This approach aligns with his reformist image and avoids escalating tensions ahead of 2026. If no response has emerged by June 2025, it may indicate a strategic choice to focus on governance priorities, as seen in his recent addresses on climate change and African unity. Limitations. The search results do not provide direct evidence of Hichilema addressing Zulu's specific statements, limiting the analysis to his general behavior and Zambia's political context. Further developments, such as media reports or official statements, would be needed to confirm his actions. For now, his track record suggests a preference for restraint and institutional responses over retaliation.